back here, everyone, to the Just Ballin' podcast. And you guys know, if you follow the podcast, that I love to talk about the NBA draft. I've gotten really into college basketball as a whole over the last 2 years. And I will say, from being kind of someone that was a casual watcher growing up, but still into it for the most part, and then I kind of lost a little bit of love for it, especially when my Temple Owls weren't the greatest team in college. Over the last 2 years, especially this year, I think college basketball is in one of the best spots it has been in a little bit. Last year, I think, was a little bit of a down year talent-wise for college basketball, but now looking at this year's March Madness bracket, or even looking at the 2025 NBA draft pool, it is night and day compared to last year. So for today's episode of the pod, I want to just break down the 2025 March Madness bracket now that the regular season is in the books, conference tournament is in the books, and yeah, we can now just finally talk about the greatest sporting event of the year, March Madness. All right, so I pretty much want to talk about 3 things when I'm breaking down this mock. The first thing we're going to talk about is prospects to watch as a whole. As you guys know, follow the pod, do love the NBA draft, and I want to kind of just hint out some prospects that could make a name for themselves, that could be a riser or could be a faller throughout the next couple of weeks. Because last year, we only got to see Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham, who still ended up being top 10 picks, but they only played in one March Madness game. Kentucky, to some people's surprise, maybe not if you know Calipari in the past, they lost to Oakland in the round of 64. But then we also saw prospects like Donovan Clingan and Stephon Castle and Zach Edey make it to the national championship game. So yeah, I want to break down prospects, and then we're going to go into some underdogs that I think could be Cinderella runs and why, and then also finish it off with my final 4 juggernauts, teams that I just would be so shocked if they didn't make it at least to the final 4, or maybe the Elite 8. So we can start off with prospects to watch. We'll go over to the South region. And Auburn does have some prospects here. When you talk about either Janai Broome, who this year was the best player in college basketball, or up there. If I had like a Naismith vote, which obviously I don't, I would probably give it to Cooper Flagg. But Janai Broome is a little bit of an older prospect, spent 2 years at Morehead State, last 3 years at Auburn, basically a super senior this year, put up 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks a night for the Auburn Tigers. Now, he's the most athletic 6'10 forward in the world, but he can still move very well. He's got a good ball handle. He's comfortable. He's cool. He's calm and collective in the half court. His 3-point shot could definitely be hit or miss at times, but he does play with a lot of energy. He plays as a very competitive forward. And I do think if you're looking for somebody that can give you 8 to 12 minutes a night on a team that's realistic goal is making it to the conference finals next year, Janai Broome is somebody that you could definitely look at now. I think when you're looking at players in the past, could he be somebody that could rise his draft stock? I think a little bit, especially if Auburn could win on the biggest stage. We saw, I think, Zach Edey help his draft stock at least a little bit last year to turn into a top 10 pick in a weaker 2024 draft. And I do think Janai Broome has a chance to become that for the Auburn Tigers this year, if he can carry them to the NBA Finals. I think Tahad Pettiford is an intriguing prospect, a little bit on the younger side, kind of like a microwave scoring freshman for this team that never really started for the Auburn Tigers this year, but can get to the rim, has a good dribble package. I think he would be worth taking a flyer in the second round if you can really buy into the development on the offensive end. But I do think he's somebody that could probably benefit staying another year at Auburn. And then you do have Chad Baker-Mazara, who I don't really love as a prospect. People do like him. I mean, I don't think he's a dirty, you could say he's a dirty player. I mean, there's some calls that's like, okay, maybe he should have been ejected a little bit earlier than that game later in the year for them. But he's somebody that can knock down some threes, that can play some defense, good length, could put on a little bit of weight, but I do think is an intriguing wing prospect if you were going to look at him as a whole. In the second round, maybe ends up more as an undrafted guy. The 8-9 matchup between Louisville and Creighton, it's got some prospects in here, because the first one you got Ryan Kalkbrenner for Creighton, one of the best big men in the country, averaged 19 points this year and 9 rebounds. Just a big body, over 7 feet tall, that you can have there in the front court. And I think doesn't move all that well, but he could be a good post scorer. I think if Zach Edey could be a top 10 pick, I mean, Kalkbrenner isn't as productive as Zach Edey was, and I hope people don't forget how dominant Edey kind of was at times in college basketball. But Kalkbrenner can be just a monster inside, a good shot blocker, 7 feet tall, maybe even 7'1", I don't know. But I do think he'd be worth, if you're looking at like the Clippers or the Suns late in the first round, that could use some big man depth. That can also help you out next year, because he's a 5-year Creighton player. And then I think for Creighton, that's probably it right now that I think would be worth going in the 2025 draft. I like Chucky Hepburn over there at Louisville. I talked about him in the sleepers video. I've talked about him in my mock draft videos. I think he plays really good defense, high motor, wants to win. Yeah, he's 6'2", but I mean, you look at like Jamal Shed last year, who he's what, 6'1", and Hepburn is bigger, stronger, could be at times more physical than Jamal Shed. Maybe not as good at the point of attack, but can hold his own defensively. He's a good shooter, much better offensive option than what Jamal Shed was last year. And Shed went in the second round in a weak draft. I think Hepburn could easily be a second round pick this year in his first year over. I always forget, like, was at Wisconsin last year, as they were very active, losing guys and getting guys in the transfer portal. That's probably it for Louisville. I don't think Terrence Edwards would end up anywhere high in the draft, or Neal from Creighton as well. But yeah, I'm just kind of filling out a bracket as we go, just to have, there's really no point in the bracket though. So next up we have Michigan and UC San Diego. Michigan does have Vlad Golden, who's maybe their best college player, but their best prospect is Danny Wolf, who I've mentioned a ton here on the pod. Playing power forward, but can also play center at the NBA level, can run DHOs, can dribble to the rim for somebody that's 7 feet tall. He's not super clumsy. The shot, I think, can be hit or miss at times. Wonky release, maybe relies on being too open. He's not going to really hit contested threes at times, but I think has good playmaking ability and could be an offensive hub out of the post, maybe off the bench. Maybe like Kelly Olynyk type. I always forget Kelly Olynyk's numbers at Gonzaga. But Kelly Olynyk was a junior. Did he try, or maybe he didn't play at all in that 2012 season, but he was incredible as a junior. 18 points, 7 rebounds, maybe not as much of a playmaker, but had a little bit of a three-point shot, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I do think Danny Wolf in that UC San Diego game, probably the only notable prospect, I would say. And yeah, we can hop over to Texas A&M and Yale. Nothing too crazy here, I don't think. Like Wade Taylor has been there for a little bit. Definitely a good college player. I just don't think he's really going to be much of an NBA talent just because of the size and the lack of consistency. But he's had some incredible scoring games in his college career. But I don't think really too much draft talent over there. Next up, we have San Diego State, Ole Miss, UNC. Probably nothing here, I would say. Like when you're looking at Ole Miss, I don't think. I thought Brakefield maybe at one point. Keyshawn Gilbert, Timon Lipsey as well. I think could be guys that could be, or Taman Lipsey, sorry. Maybe intriguing like college players, but Gilbert's not going to play in the tournament, unfortunately. And I just don't think there's anybody there. But I think more so UNC, just because they have Drake Powell and Ian Jackson, guys that could stay at college another year. I mean, breaking down like this March Madness bracket, I was very shocked when UNC goes in. Like you've heard all about it now, like 1-12 in quad 1 games. They're the commissioner of the bracket, or the head of the committee, is the UNC athletic director. He's got to technically leave the room. Oh man, like I have a little bit of bias to UNC, but I would be very annoyed if I was an Indiana fan or a West Virginia fan. Now, I would be mad if I were a fan. Guys get snubbed all the time. You're a bubble team for a reason. I do think their reasoning for West Virginia not getting in because Tucker DeVree hasn't played since December, like trying to be like Florida State football 2.0 with DJ or with Jordan Travis is kind of stupid because he's probably not even their best player. Now, he's a great player, but you're looking at Javon Small as their best player. And I think that is just idiotic for that being the reason they are out. I do think, hey, you're a bubble team. Maybe you could have won a couple more games this year. But I think it was the governor of West Virginia doing like a press conference. I just saw it on Twitter. And the NCAA was like the national something corrupt something. I don't know. I was just like, how old are you, man? Like, don't you have bigger fish to fry as the governor of West Virginia, who probably has its own economical problems, all right? Like, it does suck West Virginia did not make the tournament, and you could definitely make a compelling argument that West Virginia or Indiana should have made it over UNC. I am not disagreeing with you. UNC's offense was brutal to watch this year. I just think, okay, for the governor, it was a little embarrassing. Let people argue on Twitter. Let students of the school be upset about that. Not the governor of the state of West Virginia. But going back to UNC, Ian Jackson and Drake Powell do have some prospect intrigue. As I think Ian Jackson more of an offensive wing. I would like to see him polish his offensive game a little bit more if he were to stay in college. I don't know if that's going to happen. You never know with NIL now. UNC's got a GM with boosters, and you hear the word funneling money now through college basketball, which definitely feels like it's a Ponzi scheme or money laundering. But I do think Drake Powell, physical defender, I think has a little bit of a shot to him as well. Another guy that I think keep an eye on, especially because they play tonight. They play Tuesday night. In a couple hours, they could be eliminated from March Madness, and that could be the last time we see of those guys. But I think those are the most intriguing prospects over there. Iowa State, I don't think anything too crazy this year. I mean, you could look at Milan. I'm going to butcher his last name, but I haven't been too locked in on him this year. He's a big man that can space the floor, and I think that is intriguing. If you find the value in the Vicic brothers, I think there could be some value for him as well. Marquette in New Mexico, we got some talent here. Cam Jones, I think, is someone that should be a first-round pick in the 2025 draft. I've talked about him plenty, and then I don't think Donovan Dent is going to go to the NBA draft. But he's been an incredible scorer this year for the Lobos, and I think is more likely to return to college basketball, get a nice payday in the transfer portal. And I don't know if that's going to be following his head coach, Richard Pitino, who could end up being Virginia's head coach, or NC State's, or Nova's, because he's going to be a hot commodity out there. And then Michigan State, we got Jason Richardson as well, who has been rising up draft boards throughout the rest of conference play and in the Big Ten tournament. And I think he's a very safe option with his shot. Is going to be, I think, a big transferable trait. I think he's going to be a great shooter at the NBA level. Has got very good dribble moves. Can be a good combo guard at 6'3", maybe a little bit undersized for a combo guard. I don't know if you want to use like Colin Sexton as a comp, but I do think Richardson is going to be a good NBA athlete. So, also just want to give a shout out to Pool Genius. If you saw my bracket video on Strauss, I talked about them a little bit, but it is a really good tool to use throughout March Madness, and not just March Madness as well. If you maybe use it to try to get an edge in fantasy or betting of golf or fantasy football, baseball, survivor picks. They really have so many good tools out there where you can like import your brackets and they can give you the best updated odds, or like the way you should go about your bracket using different algorithms and analytics and adjusted odds as well. And if you're just really trying to get that edge of March Madness, you can put multiple teams together. You can get predictions against any pool. So it's not just you putting together teams in the same region together. It could be against, maybe you're predicting of the Sweet 16 and how that's going to look, or teams from different regions that can meet each other in the national championship game, like Florida and Duke, who are popular teams to go up against each other. So yeah, shout out Pool Genius. And it's going to be linked in the episode description. It's a product of Team Rankings. And they've helped sponsor some of my March Madness content. So let's go over here to the East region. You guys know about the Duke prospects. You know about Kaman Maluach, the big man who's going to go in the top 10. You know about Cooper Flagg, who we may see in the first game. I don't know if it's wise to do that. Maybe he plays like the first half or just the second half. You got Konkinippo, who's helped out his draft stock a ton. I think is trying to make a name for himself as the best shooter in this draft. Finished the season very strong throughout the ACC tournament and throughout the ACC regular season. Isaiah Evans, I think we're going to learn about him as a potential first-round pick. He's got the size. He's got the mobility. He's got the quickness and the shot, man. It's good. It's good. He can make a name for himself if he stays another year of college. Maybe he gets a nice NIL bag. I mean, a lot of these Duke guys are going to leave, but they got the Boozer twins coming in. But I think Evans could be a top player on that team next year. Tyrese Proctor could also come back if he wants for his senior year. You never know what that NIL bag could look like. But I think he's an intriguing second-round prospect as someone that I think has like Derek White traits from Colorado in a way, like good size, really good three-point shooter, maybe not the best playmaker in the world, but a good ball handler, can run in transition, and is someone that does not really turn the ball over a lot. Mississippi State and Baylor, pretty much just one notable prospect, and that is VJ Edgecombe, who you could say second best prospect in this draft, if you like him above Trey Johnson and Kasperi Shakuchonis, which I do. And with the Rutgers guys of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey not playing in March Madness, he is somebody to look at. I wish they were playing in that new tournament, the Crown, where I guess they're paying these teams to go, which that is probably something the NIT wasn't doing, and that pool looks really good. Like, there's some good teams throughout that. Oregon and Liberty, I don't think really any notable prospects here. I don't think like Jackson Shellstat or any of those guys at Oregon are probably going to be declaring for the 2025 draft or would be picked high. Arizona, I think has one, and that is Carter Bryant. Carter Bryant also, similar to Drake Powell and Isaiah Evans and Ian Jackson, could stay another year of college basketball. I think he's got 3-and-D upside, but has project to him because he didn't really get a lot of on-ball usage this year at Arizona. I'd like to see him polish his skills next year, but you never know. He may get calls from his agent that teams hinting out that he would be a first-round pick, and then I think it'd be silly not to declare for the draft. BYU and VCU, I think there's two. I think there's Max Shulga, who I think is worth a shot in the second round because of his shot ability, his off-ball movement, and I don't know if he's like probably not Duncan Robinson, probably a better prospect than that. I mean, I wonder how similar his numbers to like Austin Reeves were at Oklahoma. Austin Reeves averaged 18, 5, and 4. I mean, Austin Reeves was not really the best shooter in the world at Oklahoma either. I forget that he was a Wichita State transfer, and that was back when you had to sit out a year in the transfer portal, and that made him undrafted. I mean, Max Shulga this year, 38% from 3, 6 rebounds and 4 assists, 15 points as well. Much better of a shooter than Reeves was at Oklahoma. And apparently the committee was not going to get VCU in if they didn't win the A10 tournament, which is kind of nuts. So, yeah, they could have lost that St. Joe's, right? And I don't know. I think that would have been kind of silly. But I do wish we got to see Rasheer Fleming in the tournament. And then BYU has a notable draft prospect that has kind of been falling a little bit on draft boards, and that is Yegor Demon. Good passer, but the shot has fallen off. I think he needs to have a good game, at least in the first round of the tournament, just to have like the last memory of the casual eye of Yegor Demon is a good shooting performance. I don't think Richie Saunders would be picked high. I think Cannon Catchings had some intriguing prospect appeal early in the year, but I think that has fallen off as of late. Wisconsin, Montana, nothing too crazy. Like, I don't think John Tonje has really any prospect intrigue at the moment. But hey, couple good games. You never know. So he was a transfer, like, just I think a guy to watch too. 6'5" guard from Colorado State for 4 years, then Missouri, then Wisconsin. I was like, does he have another year of eligibility? No, he absolutely does not. I think Augustus Marsalis, I'm butchering his last name. I just said it correctly on my bracket video yesterday. I'm not gonna say it here, but I think also some second round appeal as a sleeper in this draft. Good size, good ball handling, 4-year player at St. Mary's. And then Alabama, surprisingly, doesn't really have that much prospect intrigue. Like, I don't think Mark Sears and Grant Nelson are going to go in the second round. Like, unless they have incredible tournaments. You never know, because like Mark Sears went on a run like last year, a few years ago, and that can help out a little bit. But I do think the one is LeBaron Philon, who is a freshman, way more size than what Mark Sears has, is still incredibly young, and had some good games throughout the tournament, like a good game against Kentucky, not a good game against Florida, but I think the Kentucky game, finishing off at Auburn, like, yeah, had a good end to the year, where I think if he has a couple good tournament games, could play himself back into being a top 20 pick in the draft. Florida has, I think, a couple. I think you got Alex Condon as probably the best, just because of his size, his ability to score inside, catch alley-oops, and that could be a value to maybe, I think, a big man draft that is up in the air after Kaman, because you got Derek Queen, you got Thomas Sorber, who I think Georgetown is playing in that Crown tournament, but he will not be playing in that. And I think Condon is right there with Kalkbrenner and Danny Wolf. I think Elijah Martin, as well as I think a defensive guard in the second round, or could be used with an undrafted pick. Man, that FAU team, what was it, in 2023? 35-4. They lost in the semifinal to San Diego State. You had John L. Davis, who was like a big transfer last year. You had Vlad Golden, who's balling out currently at Michigan. And then, yeah, Elijah Morton. I feel like there's somebody else there or Martin that could have came through that. And then I think the last player would be Walter Clayton Jr., or Walter Clayton, maybe not junior. Or no, he is a junior. I think a very good scoring guard, can get to the rim, can finish downhill. I mean, 2 years at Iona. Did he play with Rick Pitino there? Yeah, he did. That's pretty cool. I'm surprised he couldn't get him to go to St. John's. Maybe he was. I mean, he did transfer after 2023. Huh. Surprised he didn't. Yeah, he couldn't get him to go to St. John's, but maybe got more money from Florida. But yeah, I think Walter Clayton is also somebody that can, a couple good tournament games, easy second round pick. UConn and Oklahoma, we got some prospects in this game. You got Jeremiah Fears. We've talked about him a ton. Where's the upside down headband? And finished off the season on a very strong note for Oklahoma. I think Lee McNeely needs to have a good tournament run, at least for 1 or 2 games, because his shot has been falling off a cliff over the last month. And then you also have Alex Caravan as well, who I think will still be a first-round pick because of his large sample size of being an elite shooter at college. Memphis and Colorado State, I think you got Nick Clifford, mentioned him. First-round player that's his shot, like opposite of Lee McNeely, has been off like the charts as of late, and he ended up helping Colorado State win the Mountain West Championship, and I think he's going to be a first-round pick. And then I don't think PJ Haggerty is going to be an NBA draft player this year, as he went from TCU to Tulsa to Memphis. He's going to be somebody, who knows, maybe he gets a bag somewhere else, but I think he could stay with Memphis and under Penny Hardaway. Maryland's got Derek Queen. I think I would like to see some defense upside like throughout the tournament. And I don't know, the shot looked pretty good against Michigan at times. Like he knocked down 2 threes after not knocking down a 3 for a while, and was great against Michigan. He's a polarizing prospect for me. I was a little bit lower on Queen, but I'm starting to lean into the lottery hype. Drake and Mizzou. I don't think Mark Mitchell of Mizzou is that much of a prospect. I think Bennett Sturtz is, like, I would take him in the second round because I think he's one of the smarter players that would be coming out here in the second round. Great court vision and basketball IQ, and has a decent size, but he does have another year of eligibility. He could be a hot name in the transfer portal. Texas Tech, they do have JT Toppin. I don't think he's going to go to the NBA draft, but I think it would be worth a top 45 pick just based off the college production alone and the offensive like touch inside. Kansas and Arkansas. I think Arkansas has got a couple more intriguing prospects. First up, you have a Due Theroux who could play himself into a first round pick. I think this is a big potential run for Arkansas. If they can at least get 2 games out there, and a Due Theroux who's got size and defensive ability can work his way into a first round pick. Boogie Fland, I believe, is coming back against Kansas. We haven't seen him back since January. Hey, if he can finish at the rim a little bit more, fresh in your mind, that could go a long way. And then Zvonimir Visic, I think just because he could be a floor spacer at 7'2", it's very valuable in today's NBA. And then for Kansas, I mean, I don't even think they really have an intriguing draft prospect right now. Like, Floyd Badunga is maybe one of the more intriguing guys just because he's a freshman, very physical inside, but I think could stay. Like, AJ Storr, man, his stock is cratered after being, I forget what. Oh my God, yeah, he was at St. John's in 23. But he was great for Wisconsin last year. I forget what Kansas is paying him, but they are not getting a good return on the investment. DeJuan Harris, I don't think would have much draft stock, neither with Hunter Dickinson or Zeke Mayo. I think Floyd Badunga is the only one. Yeah, it's been a disastrous year. And then St. John's, I think RJ Lewis in the second round. I think he is somebody that could go. But I think there's a chance he could return to St. John's because I believe he loves playing with Rick Pitino. Kadary Richmond, probably not, but I mean, there is some defense there, and NBA scouts do love defense in the second round, so I think that is a possibility. Let's go over here to the Midwest, where you do have, I think, at least, what's his name? LJ Cryer. I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. I think similar to like Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shed in a way. I think a little bit better of an offensive player than Jamal Shed. Maybe not as good defensively. Gonzaga, I mean, they're intriguing in a way. Like, I don't, like, Michael Ajayi has not helped out his draft stock this year, I would say. Nolan Hickman, Khalif Battle, shout out Temple. I don't think any of these guys. I think the one guy I do like is Ryan Nembhard, but he's a little bit like undersized at 6 foot. Brother of Andrew Nembhard. I mean, how much taller is Andrew Nembhard, at least according to Basketball Reference, than Nembhard? He's 5 inches taller, yeah. It's tough, man. It's tough with these smaller guards that are great offensive players in college, but it's tough for them to really make a name for themselves in the NBA just because everybody's a lot taller there. I think Chase Hunter would have maybe flyer in the second round type, a little bit of an older prospect, but a phenomenal shooter for Clemson this year. 6-year Clemson player. And the 3-point shot was never this good until this year, but you never know. A good tournament run could earn himself in the first round, or not, excuse me, in the second round. Purdue high point, I would say Braden Smith of Purdue, but another smaller guard that I don't think has a great defensive upside. He's 6 foot tall, but phenomenal passer, man. One of the best passers in college basketball. I think he's going to go back to Purdue for his senior year. Illinois has at least 3 prospects. First one being Kispera Shakuchonis, who could go in the first round. Modern day size and playmaking ability, I think, could use a good tournament game or 2. Will Riley, similar to all the guys I talked about earlier, but I think would be way worth more using a first round pick on than Powell, Ian Jackson, or Carter Bryant. I might like Isaiah Evans a little bit more because I do worry about Will Riley's defense, but hey, you get him in that NBA strength and conditioning program. He could be an intriguing scorer and ball handler at 6'8". And then you have Zvonimir Visic's brother, Tomislav Visic, just had him up, who also does have a little bit of floor spacing ability for somebody that is 7'1". Imagine just that household. Like, your 2 sons are 7'1" and 7'2". That is kind of crazy. Kentucky, I mean, I don't think really has the best draft, like high-end draft prospects, but Kobe Brea, I think, is one of the best shooters in this draft and should go in the second round just because, hey, shooting comes at a premium in the NBA. I mean, Otega always had some really good games. I don't know about his draft stock. I mean, he's got size. Shot's been good. He's hit some clutch shots as of late as well against his former team, against Oklahoma. good tournament run. You never know. I do think Amari Williams as a big has also some draft intrigue. So I think keep an eye on Kentucky. They go on a little bit of a run. They have their injuries. These guys could help out their draft stock because, yeah, they are banged up in a way. UCLA and Utah State, I wouldn't say anybody too notable from that game. And then Tennessee, I would keep an eye on Chaz Lanier and Jemai Meshack. So those were the prospects to keep an eye on throughout March Madness. I know I just hit you with a ton. Maybe you're just going to take in a couple of them, but keep an eye on those guys to see if they can help their draft stock or hurt their draft stock. And then next up, I just want to talk about some of my favorite underdogs. So I would say probably I think a 6 seed or lower. I think 5, you're not really an underdog. 6, you're not really an underdog either, but I do think there are some 6 seeds that could end up making a run, and we're just going to talk about those teams right now. So I think in the South region, I've talked about it. I think Louisville or Creighton, the 8 or 9 matchup, there's a chance whoever makes out of that matchup, I think, is making it to the Sweet 16 and they can pull off the upset of Auburn, who is the #1 team in this bracket. I disagree with that. I think Duke should have been the #1 team. Auburn has not been playing some of their best basketball as of late. I think the size of Kalkbrenner, the defense and versatility of Louisville could provide that mismatch for Auburn. And I forget if the round of 32 would be in Lexington, but the game is in Kentucky, and that's not far from Louisville going up against Creighton. So I do like the chance, maybe not a Final Four run, because, I mean, you know what? There could be an Elite 8 run. I think this region is kind of wide open when you're talking about the South region, because I do think Louisville or Creighton could beat Auburn. And then if it's Michigan, A&M, UC San Diego or Yale, everybody's on UC San Diego to be an upset team. I'm a little bit higher on Michigan. I think their size is going to provide a noticeable mismatch against UC San Diego, and I do think Michigan is going to win that game. I like Yale as an upset over A&M. I do think A&M with Wade Taylor's inconsistent shot making, he's not hitting his shots. Yale could go on a little bit of a run, especially in the second half, the way they've been this year, and kind of reading up more on Yale and these mid to smaller schools. I don't really watch throughout the year. I watch throughout the regular season draft prospects, and then once we start hearing the bubble teams that win their conference tournament, I start to learn more about these teams, and I do think Yale has upset written all over it, like they upset at Auburn last year. And they could beat Michigan, but I do think there's a chance we either see Michigan, and then it could be Creighton or Louisville in that Sweet 16. And then kind of down here, I like San Diego State. It's funny because, they could lose in a few hours from now. But I think San Diego State, if they beat UNC, I think they could beat Ole Miss. With the injury to Gilbert on Iowa State, I think they are vulnerable. They can maybe squeak past Lipscomb, or they could blow them out. I mean, I'm not super high on Lipscomb as an upset team, but I do think that they could be vulnerable to San Diego State and the physicality that they play with. UNC, I think they're also kind of like an A&M in a way. RJ Davis and Wade Taylor, there are the #1 scorers, and there are moments where RJ Davis is going to be inconsistent. Elliot Cadeau is way too passive. I think Ian Jackson and Drake Powell were mismanaged by Hubert Davis throughout the year, where they're not aggressive enough and they don't have the confidence at this moment. Then you're relying on Trimble and Tyson and Withers, and I don't UNC has the program, they have the talent. They just haven't been able to put it together this year. I don't see them making it a run. I like San Diego State a little bit more than them. And then I would say in the bottom left, Michigan State, I like a ton. I don't think Marquette would get past Michigan State. I do think the Lobos, New Mexico, does have some upside, because I do think Donovan Dent is him. And having somebody that can crash the glass like Nelly Jr. as well. I think I like New Mexico. I think it's the biggest upset team in this region, or if it's going to be Louisville or Creighton, that can really burst some brackets and or bust some brackets, right? So I guess we can also talk about what do we got here? The East region. I think Duke is going to make it to the national championship game. We'll talk about more of them in their juggernaut. So talking about upset teams, I like VCU a ton. I mentioned Max Shulga earlier before, but this team can also slow down a little bit, and they can control the pace, and they can play some really good defense. And I think that could provide a very uncomfortable matchup against BYU. It's just they play Wisconsin, and a lot of the advanced metrics in KenPom like Wisconsin. So I think it's just a tough draw for VCU. If they were going up against maybe an Arizona or an Oregon or maybe a different 3 seed, I could like them to advance. Iowa State, yeah, I would be on VCU. But I just don't think we're going to see a big upset team. I think maybe the biggest upset in this region would be St. Mary's beating Alabama. And I don't remember Vanderbilt playing Bama earlier in the year. Did we get... Yeah, they lost by 16. Either way, I do think St. Mary's is going to beat Vanderbilt. I think they could pull off the upset off Alabama, and that's the biggest upset team. but I don't think we could see a notable team making it to the Elite Eight like the other region, which would be the South region. The West region, I mean, UConn, hey, they've won the last 2 national championship games. They have a great coach. They have still a deep roster, but hey, there's a chance they get sent home in 9-8. I think Florida's too good. Colorado State could easily upset Memphis. That is a popular one, 100% with the way Nick Clifford is playing, and there's been some bad Memphis losses this year. And hey, they almost didn't even make it out of the American winning that at least conference tournament, which the American, it's not what it used to be, unfortunately. But hey, they beat UConn, they beat Michigan State, some notable wins in the out-of-conference schedule this year, and Clemson. And Colorado State, I think, could make a run as well. I can't see Memphis beating Maryland or Florida. I think there is a chance Colorado State could beat Maryland, but I don't think they're making a true Cinderella run. Drake could beat Mizzou. Bennett's third time. You're going to hear the name. I don't think Texas Tech loses to UNC Wilmington, but I also wouldn't be totally shocked. This is one I'm keeping an eye on. If JT Toppin isn't going, how is that team going to look with Darren Williams? I think I should have mentioned Darren Williams before in my prospect segment, so I apologize about that. Keep an eye on him. Kansas now. I think St. John's is going to run into Kansas or Arkansas, obviously. It's going to be a nightmare for those teams. St. John's is too good defensively, and I don't think these teams and their talent wanted enough this year. And I think St. John's is an easy Sweet 16 team. Drake could go on a miraculous run, I think. But I also think this region could be a little bit chalky as well, as Florida and St. John's end up going mostly all the way in their region. I think Gonzaga could beat Houston. Hey, they lose to Georgia, which could definitely happen. This is not going to happen, obviously. But Gonzaga is a top 10 team in KenPom. I feel like they've blown some really winnable games this year in their out-of-conference. I guess most notably to Kentucky. I think UConn, it could go either way. They don't have the greatest out-of-conference schedule this year. Somebody like UNC who played some very good teams out of conference. And hey, Houston's a great defensive team. But Gonzaga has the depth. They have one of the best point guards in the country. They could score on the perimeter. I think they would be like the biggest seed to make a run here. So like 8 seeded Gonzaga. I guess I'm like high on 8 seeded Gonzaga. I'm high on 10 seeded New Mexico. I'm high on 9 seeded Creighton or 8 seeded Louisville. I think are the teams that can actually make it to the Elite Eight, which is like a true Cinderella run. I think also keep an eye on maybe like Akron to beat Arizona. Arizona has lost very early in the tournament in the past. I mentioned San Diego State. I think any 14 seeds I like. I don't think we're going to see any 15-2 upsets. You never know. It's March Madness. I don't think Lipscomb beats Iowa State. I don't think Montana beats Wisconsin. I'm high on Wisconsin. High Point Purdue is an interesting one, but that's a 13. People like Troy to beat Kentucky. Kentucky is banged up, but I still think Mark Pope has a ton of talent over there. And I think maybe keep an eye on UNC Wilmington as well. And then I want to talk about teams that I just can't see losing before the Elite Eight. So to wrap things out, I think St. John's and Florida are going to end up there in the in the Elite Eight. I do think this is the toughest region. I do think Florida can lose to UConn. I do think they can lose to Maryland. I think St. John's has a little bit of a better, honestly, matchup to get to the Elite Eight, and they're the 2 seed. I like them against Texas Tech, and I love them against Arkansas or Kansas. Yeah, I think Florida has a tough path, but man, their wings, their guards, their bigs, they're incredibly deep this year. I just know that their coach has not won, I believe, a tournament game yet. In the Midwest region, I'm a little skeptical about Houston because we haven't seen it all that much in the past. I think that I'm very confident it's going to at least make it to the Elite Eight. I would say Tennessee because with Kentucky being banged up and Illinois being very inconsistent this year, I do think, I also didn't talk about Texas Xavier. Sorry about the prospect video. Yeah, obviously Trey Johnson, and keep an eye on Dalen Swain at Xavier. I apologize. It was just like the 11 matchup that I just kind of forgot to go over. But I do think Tennessee has one of the best matchups. Pats here, I think a little bit better than Houston because I think Gonzaga's tough. I think Gonzaga is a way tougher matchup than if it's going to be a Purdue or Clemson for Houston in the Elite Eight. So yeah, I would say I'm probably most comfortable about Tennessee, St. John's, and Florida in the Midwest and West regions. And then up here in the East region, Duke, I feel very confident about. And I honestly like Wisconsin more than I like Bama to make it to the Elite Eight. But I think it can go either way, and I'm really only confident about Duke making it to the Elite Eight. And then I think the South region is, I think I may have more faith in Michigan State than Auburn, honestly. Both teams have an incredibly tough path. Getting New Mexico or Marquette in the round of 32 for Michigan State could have upset Ren all over it. I know there's been some letdowns in the past with some Michigan State teams with Tom Izzo, but I like their path a little bit more than Auburn, because I think getting Creighton or Louisville in the round of 32 is a tough matchup for Auburn. And then you beat them, and you got to go up maybe against Michigan. That is tough in the Sweet 16. I do think Michigan State is like the team I feel most confident about the most making it all the way. So I would say Duke, Michigan State, or some teams I really like. I like Tennessee, and then I like St. John's or Florida. One team is going to be sent home, I think, a little bit earlier than they would like to this year. So, yeah, I think March Madness is going to be incredible. I think so many teams can win it. I mean, that has been one of the benefits of NIL, as in the transfer portal, there's so many more teams that are competitive this time around. And I think it does make a chance for some crazy upsets to happen, or guys to really help out their draft stocks on teams that maybe they would have been like the 8th man in the past. And now they could play themselves into first round picks on a little bit of a smaller program. So yeah, hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the Just Ballin' podcast. Make sure to check out Pool Genius. Link is in the YouTube and the Spotify/Apple podcast description as well. If you want to get your edge in March Madness this year, you can use my link there. And yeah, if you guys did enjoy it, I appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think about March Madness in the YouTube comments, or in the Spotify comments, or hey, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, let me know on Twitter. And I really appreciate you if you can leave a rating and review. It can really help the podcast grow on all platforms. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.